You coming up, James?
No, I'm going. No, I have to get out.
Why not? No, but are you going to that deep? Right, we are. right, we are.
Good morning. We are with a group from Jetty Ace in New York. We are leaving this morning. Today is a Sunday. What is it? January the 12th. We are on our way to Schechter Institute, this parallel institute to the one in New York. After a lecture and a meeting over there, we're going to go down to the whole city of Jerusalem to visit the Western Wall, the Southern Wall with the 7 steps, and to go down to visit the city of David. And we are planning to end the day today quite early because most of the people are leaving tonight back home. What, Marjorie? We're going to have the follower dinner at the hotel. We're going to leave the hotel at 8 in the evening on the way to the Ben Gurion Airport. Those of you who are going to stay in Jerusalem, you can leave your luggage at the luggage room. It's right next to, you remember those of you who arrive early to the hotel, right next to the luggage room. Over there you can store your luggage for after dinner or whatever you have in mind to do. Any question? Is clear about the departure tonight? Yes? Thank you.
My name is Dana Roan Sorokin, and I'm from Westchester, New York, Bedford Hills, and I currently live in Manhattan.
Why did you decide to come this time to Israel?
My husband and I came to Israel last year. I was studying for the year at Machon Schechter, which is the conservative rabbinical school in Jerusalem, and he was working at the time for a small nonprofit here. But we decided to come back. It was actually a really easy decision for us. For us, both my husband and I feel like it's important for American Jews and diaspora Jews to be in Israel now, and I gave a lot of thought to this while we were here for the year. And I feel really strongly that if we really believe in a Jewish homeland, which is a question I think we seriously need to ask ourselves as American Jews and diaspora Jews, if we really believe in it, how can we not be here, and how can we not be a part of our story and our struggle, and also just to support in times when it's particularly hard.
Did you ever have a moment that you felt unsafe, unsecure?
Honestly, most of the time I felt very comfortable and very secure. There was a time last night I actually went to a birthday party for one of my friends that lives in Israel. And afterwards I stopped at a burger bar with other friends, and it got really busy and it was a crowded place. So there was a moment where I felt like it maybe wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, so we just left and went back to the hotel and spent time together. So for the most part, no, I felt very safe and comfortable, but I think it's important to kind of trust your gut and instincts. And I tried to find places, you know, I'm aware of which places have guards and security and everything else.
You didn't actually got scared because of afraid of a bombing. It was just too crowded. Oh.
Really?
Help.
Look, I think after living here for a year, we had to come up with some boundaries and some ideas that made us feel comfortable. So for me, one of the things that I chose not to do was take the buses. It's kind of a luxury that I had in only being here for a year at a time instead of a long term, because I knew that if I spent money, I could afford to do it in that limited case. So things like taking the bus I didn't do. I didn't go to the shuk last year. I would go to the shuk now, but I use my sense and I use my gut, and when I feel not comfortable, I leave.
Thank
Sorry.
you. What are the message that you're gonna deliver back home to your friend, your people? Come to Israel?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like right now we're kind of at this turning point, or a critical point in the relationship between Israelis and Jews in Israel and diaspora Jews living outside of Israel. And I feel like if we want to be able to come here to Israel when things are good, then I think that we also need to show up when things aren't good. For me, I just don't see how we can come back and expect Israelis to open our arms and to believe us to be people that they can count on in a community with them if we don't show up when things are hard too. I think that's part of what it means to be a part of a family.
Thank you.
And I would also request the guys, Julie, who filled in the spot, and ask Marcelo and David and Jonathan to come forward and sit near the front. Thank you. Oh, you're okay, David. Okay.
You might get called.
Am I supposed to smile? The Dean of the Rabbinical School here at the Schechter Institute, and it really is indeed a profound pleasure to be able to see all of you here, and it's so wonderful that you've chosen to come and spend time with us and to spend time here in the country. God only knows how much emotional support we need these days, so we thank you very much. We have about an hour to spend together, so I'm feeling sorry already for my friends and colleagues who are standing at the back. Not so much for Moshe and Richie and Yael. They're only teachers. They can. Anyway, if you can find a place to sit, please do. You can't hear me. Really? Higher? What? Like that? Is that okay now? No? You have to talk right into it like that? Okay. In front of you, you have, first of all, before I begin, I want to really welcome you, really on behalf of our president, Rabbi David Golinkin, who unfortunately can't be here this morning. He's returning, I think, in the next day or so, doing a very important job called fundraising. So he asked me to fill in for him, and I really am very much delighted to do so. There's only so much information that you're going to be able to absorb this morning, so I really don't want to spend a great deal of time sharing with you all of the wonderful statistics, even though our publicity person, Linda Price, who is very integrally involved in setting this up, would very much like me to go over all of the wonderful, fantastic details of how we have grown from a fledgling institution to what we are today. So you can see it on the back of the page here. You can take a look and see how we've become a major educational institution here in the State of Israel. Back in 1984, when the decision was made by the seminary under the leadership of the late Rabbi Gershon Cohen Zal, we started with 5 rabbinical students. And we've gone from strength to strength ever since, because we are obviously clearly meeting a vital and desperate need here in the State of Israel. In fact, this year, as of this year, we have over 60 rabbinical school graduates who have graduated and are serving within the Israeli population. In addition to which, you'll see that we also have a graduate school. Once again, the numbers you can see for yourselves. But the most important and wonderful news that we have to share with you happened just this past week, when the Council for Higher Education in the State of Israel, which oversees all of the universities in the country, after many years, finally awarded to the Schechter Institute as the first Israeli institution with representation from abroad to grant our own graduate degree as an autonomous Israeli institution. And that is just, that is to the credit of all of us who have been working for many years to see that happen, and it is certainly due to the awesome support that we've had from the seminary and from the current Chancellor, from Chancellor Schorsch. It also means that as of this week, we are technically no longer legally tied to the seminary from the viewpoint of awarding that degree, and I dare say that the seminary is immensely happy to finally have its child begin to grow up and begin to loosen the apron strings, if not cut them to a very great degree. Although we certainly expect that the seminary will be integrally involved in the next project that we have, which is the building of our campus, which is already taking shape. We already have the architect, and God willing, with the proper funding, within the next, the projected date is somewhere around 5 years from now, we will see the physical transformation of this piece of property. I'm really going to skip over the Tali portion of what we're doing. You can see for yourself the way I like to explain Tali, for those of you who don't know it. It's kind of the equivalent of a Solomon Schechter education within the Israeli school system. And if you understand what that's all about, then that's really what we're trying to do, is to enrich kids going to the public school system here and to give them an enriched element of Jewish education. And finally, the last item on the page is Midreshet Yerushalayim, which is a whole cacophony and panoply of programs that are run primarily for Russian immigrants who have come to Israel, as well as those who are currently living in the former Soviet Union, and we have a number of outreach programs for them as well. So please take the sheet with you and be as delighted as we are with our progress. I'd like to really spend the next few minutes going back to the mid to late 80s when I came on the scene, and I want to ask a question and then answer it, and that is, why was the rabbinical school established officially in 1984? And to answer that question, I would try to draw a comparison between education of a high school student in Israel and the education of a high school student in America. Can you imagine going through the high school experience in America, and being a Canadian, I had to look up all the following information. Can you imagine going through such an experience without at least some exposure, not necessarily in-depth scholarly knowledge, but at least some degree of exposure to the following names? The drafters of the American Constitution, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you will. Ben Franklin or James Madison, Alexander Hamilton. Or to the debate between Thomas Jefferson and James Madison over a decentralized political system versus a centralized system suggested by Alexander Hamilton. Or the philosophical musings of an Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, or to be exposed to the name of John Dewey, the educator, or a jurist like Oliver Wendell Holmes, or the 19th century, late 19th century historian Frederick Draxton Turner, or novelists like Mark Twain, Hemingway, Sinclair Lewis, Steinbeck, Faulkner, or to William James, to pick a name. Am I doing okay? So what has all that got to do with the price of tea in China? What it has to do with is that's what it means to go through a liberal arts education and to be exposed to the very best of what American civilization has represented, and to enter into the dialogue and to the debate. And I draw that picture for you because the equivalent of the American educational experience of being exposed to the great minds of American civilization is precisely what is missing from the Israeli high school experience, where 80% of kids who are not connected to the Jewish experience are not exposed to names like Rashi and Maimonides and the various movements in Judaism, the names of Frankel and Geiger and Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Or they may go through the entire educational experience and never ever open up a Siddur. I recall the former dean and president of this institution, Professor Lee Levine, telling me once that he's a world-famous archaeologist in Jewish history in the Second Temple period. He had a graduate student who was about to get his doctorate in the period of Bayit Sheni, Second Temple period. And he had never, ever opened up a Siddur. Lo Yu'man. Or, to this day, the writings of Kaplan and Heschel and Soloveitchik are just not known in this country, and goodness knows how much we need that kind of diversity of thought. Or let me go give you another example. A few years ago there was a conference held at the Knesset of diaspora leaders with Israeli leaders from all fields, and at that point someone got up, and I'll tell you who it was in a moment, because I don't want to steal my thunder. And the question was asked of him, what will it take for the Jewish people and for Judaism to survive in the 21st century? And the answer he gave was, you have to have a Brit Milah appropriately. You have to get married under a chuppah, and you have to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. That's what you need. That's what will ensure the survival of the Jewish people. And the person who said that was the then president of the country, Ezer Weizmann. I don't blame him. But he represents that segment of society that is so far removed from anything that we in this institution would identify and qualify as Judaism. Or, if I haven't made the point yet, one more example. I teach a course in religious movements, and I have 85% of my students are essentially secular, 15% are Chofshei Kippah, and I raised with them the question or the name of Yechezkel Kaufman. Now, everybody in this room, of course, I presume almost everybody, knows the name, as do they. Because everyone knows that you can't go through a Bible course without some exposure to Kaufman's famous Toldot HaEmunah Yisraelit. But then I asked them, and what about Gola v'Nechar? What about Exile and Alienation, the book that he wrote in 1929 and 1930 when Kaufman was already a doctor and was teaching at the high school, at the Realia High School in Haifa. He was not on any faculty of any university in the country. And they did not know what I was talking about. And these are creme de la creme students. Wonderful to have them, mature. Take a look at the page here and you'll see all the graduates and where they come from. These are all functioning teachers in the state of Israel. And they did not know about Gola v'Nechar. What's so important about Gola v'Nechar, and why is it that they don't know? Because Kaufman, in that book, makes it very clear that Jewish survival must go beyond ethnicity and nationalism. It must include the component of religion. Religion and peoplehood together will enable the survival of the Jewish people. So it's not surprising that they didn't know, and it's also not surprising that Yechezkel Kaufman spent the better part of his life as a high school teacher, until finally, with great embarrassment, because of his awesome accomplishments, in 1949 they jumped him up from being a high school teacher to being a full professor of Bible at the Hebrew University. They could no longer ignore him, and yet even in not ignoring him, when he was awarded a number of prizes in the years thereafter, every time they awarded him, the academic scholars who paid him tribute and honor continued to criticize him in public, because they could not see and refused to see the interconnection and the mingling of religion and nationalism. So, that is why Machon Shechter came into being. Because we want to be able to amplify and to broaden the definition of what it means to be Jewish. And I have to tell you, I think you're all aware that the vote on the shaping of Israeli society is not yet in. We are in a race. And in that race, there are competing visions of what Israeli society should look like. And that is why the Shechter Institute came into being, to provide its vision along with others. And we are in a very, very deep and heavy-laden race. So that's what we do internally for the Israeli population, but that is not the total message. The other message has to do with what we try to do for those of you who come here from abroad, from the seminary, from the Ziegler School in Los Angeles, from the Seminario in Buenos Aires, spending a year here, and I see all my students here, so in case you don't know why you're here, I'm about to tell you. Here's why you're here. First of all, to improve your Hebrew. As Professor Schorsch, in his wonderful piece on core clusters, where he evaluates the core clusters of conservative Judaism, cites Chaim Nachman Bialik. Any of you know the line? What Bialik had to say? When you study something in translation, it's like kissing the bride through the veil. Not bad, but not quite authentic enough. So that is one of the reasons why you're here. All right, to really sharpen to the degree that you can your Hebrew skills, but also your text skills, because we all know that ability to deal with a classical text will improve your competency as interpreters of the tradition to the communities that you will eventually serve. And the final reason, almost the final reason why you're here, is to gain a much deeper understanding of the complexity of Israel in our attempt to build a complete Jewish civilization, taking full responsibility for every aspect of life. What is the difference between romantic love and mature love? And what is that got to do with anything? Because when people come to Israel, at least up until the last number of years, it was with a sense of romantic love. You know, it was dancing the hora and going up on Masada and feeling good about the country, what the country is giving me, to make me feel better and more proud as a Jew. And it still does that to a great degree, but we've come to realize that there are a whole range of challenges and problems that Israel is facing. And here's where mature love comes in, because mature love is loving in the face of imperfection. Can those of us who live here, day to day, year to year, continue to love Israel in the face of its warts? And the same goes for those of you who spend that year here and who will come in years to come to spend your year here. Will you be able to love Israel and go back and transmit a message of love in the face of imperfection and get the message across? If you can do that, Yofi, that's wonderful. And we, in spending the year here, we think that we are assisting you in that endeavor. And the final reason, which is kind of a subtext, but it's really very true, another reason you're all here is because it's the only time in the history of your studies that this institution serves as a focal point for all rabbinical students coming from, who are affiliated with our ideology, who come here to Israel. New York, Los Angeles, Buenos Aires, and Israel. And that makes for a wonderful, wonderful cross-fertilization of ideas and dialogue and sometimes debate. But so be it. That is my talk for the morning. And it's my pleasure now to invite 4 students who are going to take a few minutes each to tell you about what it means for them as rabbinical students to be here in Israel. Okay, I'm just going to tell you who they are, and they're going to come up one after the other. We'll start with no particular order. Julie Roth from the seminary, followed by Marcelo Bater from the Seminario, followed by David Kosak from Ziegler, and finishing up with Jonathan Rudnick from Schechter. Toda.
But personally for me, when I was davening with you on Friday night, I was surprised by how moving it was for me to be surrounded by familiar and unfamiliar faces from the seminary, and I appreciate your being here very much. Not only because I feel your support in your being here, but because your presence, your visit even before you came, has provoked many questions in my mind and in the mind of my classmates here at Machon Schechter about what it means for you to visit, what it means for us to be here from the U.S., studying here, even though half or maybe 2/3 of my classmates remain in the U.S., and what the meaning, the ikar of the meaning of this year has been for me. I want to begin by saying that I wish I could speak to you right now in Hebrew. I never would have expected to say something like that before I came here. Aval achshav, now I know that there are students here, my classmates, from Israel and from South America, who don't understand everything I'm saying because I'm speaking in English, and have come to understand that Hebrew is the shared language of the Jewish people. So I want to focus on three things this morning: Hebrew, global Judaism, and what I call the fear factor. I'm going to begin with Hebrew. If you can imagine, this room that you're sitting is our Beit Midrash. It's not so dissimilar from the Beit Midrash at JTS. Usually there are tables here with chairs around them. You see the books that are surrounding you. These are the same types of books we have in our Beit Midrash. But the difference is that here sit in Chavruta conservative Jews, or Jews as part of the Masorti movement from the U.S., from both the East Coast and the West Coast, and the Midwest. I'm from Ohio. From South America, and also from Israel. And you can hear spoken in this Beit Midrash in Chavruta English, Spanish, Hebrew, Russian, and French, because there are students here as part of the Israeli group that are coming from other countries and going back to serve those countries. And then when we get together in our classrooms, we speak in Hebrew, because Hebrew is the shared language of the Jewish people. And I've come to love the Hebrew language because here at Machon Shechter and in Israel, it jumps off of the page. The language that I grew to connect to through prayer. Here is the same language in which I ask somebody pass me the napkins. It's the same language in which my teacher and my Israeli classmates make fun of me in my Talmud class. Jokes that I sometimes understand, sometimes don't. And it's the same language where we ask difficult questions about what it means to be here in difficult times and to react perhaps differently to a pigua that affect more foreign workers than Israelis than to one that was here in our backyard in Jerusalem. I want to say one more thing about Hebrew before I move on. When I was at JTS, we took modern Hebrew classes. In rabbinical school, we're required to go through level C2. And my attitude was this: I'm learning Hebrew for the sake of understanding the text. I didn't value my modern Hebrew class in the same way that I valued my Talmud class or any of my other text classes. And now that I'm here, I realize that it's Hebrew that gives me the opportunity to connect with Klal Yisrael. Yes, my text skills have improved, and that's very important to me. But it goes far beyond that. And I know there are many List College students in this group. And from what I understand, you have a Hebrew requirement, but you're not required to go all the way to level C2. And I'm encouraging you to go through level C2, because that level of Hebrew allows me to converse with Israelis in the street and here at Machon Shechter. And I also wanted to say that when you go back to be ambassadors, which I understand is your tafkid, your role here and being in this trip, don't just encourage people to come to Israel, because I hope people are going to come, but also encourage them to speak and to learn Hebrew, because that's another way that we can support Israel. Global Judaism. First of all, I want to be clear. When I'm talking about global Judaism, I'm not talking about American-style globalization, where the Americans try to make the rest of the world just like them. I'm talking about global Judaism, where you can see a similarity in the conservative or Masorti movement around the world, but understand the particularities that are different to each country. I think one of the most meaningful things for me being here has been studying with classmates from other countries. It's really the first time I recognized the word Masorti as being a word that applies to the international conservative movement. And it's the first time I thought about it, because I'm an American, and the reality is our view tends to be very narrow. We tend to focus on ourselves. There are those who argue that the Jew within situation in America means we're not even focusing on the American Jewish community. We're focusing literally on ourselves and our own families. And I feel that being here has helped me focus on a much larger sense of family. When Rabbi Anat Rimon was speaking on Friday night at the dinner about the Masorti movement here in Israel, somebody at my table turned to somebody else and said, "Do you consider yourself a conservative Jew?" I wasn't surprised by this question because I know myself that even as a rabbinical student at JTS, I'm not always so strong in my feeling that I am a conservative Jew. But being here in Israel, I realize that this is yet another thing that we as American Jews take for granted. And listening to Anat Rimon speak on Friday night, I realized that this opportunity to have an ideology that combines tradition and change, to be part of a halachic movement that's struggling with modern issues, is a privilege that's not shared in all countries in the world. We have tremendous resources as a part of our movement in the United States, and so I stand here because I'm in Israel, because I've met the Masorti Jews from elsewhere as a proud conservative Jew. I want to say two other things about global Judaism. We go on field trips here, which is a wonderful part of our education. I've learned from those field trips and from conversations with my classmates that the international Masorti movement does need us as Americans. They need our financial support and our support in other ways, as Anat Rimon was speaking about. But I want to just drive that point home a little bit stronger. It shocked me to realize that my Argentinian classmates and classmates from other countries in South America are facing a situation where here in their 5th year, they're being ordained as rabbis, but the economic situation in South America is such that they don't have congregations that can pay them salaries to go back to. And meeting these people and getting to know them personally, it's a shocking situation to me. There's this tremendous resource of people, rabbis, to go out there and serve this community, and there's not resources to pay them. By the same token, we took a field trip to a synagogue in Ashkelon, one of the most successful Masorti synagogues here in Israel. It's successful because it's not just a place where English speakers go, where Olim from America go. It's a place that has native-born Israelis. It has Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews. They started a Tali school, a school where they teach Judaism, that's thriving in their community. They so successfully absorbed the Russian immigrant population into their synagogues. The Russians started their own Masorti synagogue there. The rabbi is working there, has been working there for some 16 years. And he told me that they don't know if they'll be able to stay open next year. And I said, what do you mean? It's so hard to understand as an American Jew what it means that in Israel, rabbis get paid through the government because people pay taxes for these things, but none of the money goes to the conservative movement. And the funds are low this year, and such a successful synagogue doesn't even know if it's going to be able to be open. So they need us financially, but I also want to say that we have a lot to learn from the conservative movement, from their creativity. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into detail because I'm supposed to be wrapping up. So what I'll say is this. We often think about Klal Yisrael in terms of what we can do for Klal Yisrael. But being here in Israel, I realized that Klal Yisrael is a synergy. It's an energetic process whereby I gain more from being together with Klal Yisrael than I would have by myself if you added what I had and what they had. And so I'd like to close by saying something about the fear factor. I almost didn't come to Israel this year because I was afraid to come. And one of the most important things that was said to me was said by Rabbi Libo, the dean of the rabbinical school. He told me that it's okay that I'm afraid, that I shouldn't pretend that I'm not afraid. There are reasons to be afraid, but that I should go anyway. And that was very important to me. And I see here, being in Israel, that life continues here. It doesn't just continue here, it's easier to be here during a pigua, because when you're living here, somehow it feels like there's nothing else you have to do. You just continue with your life. You come to Machon Shechter, you study in the Beit Midrash. And so I encourage you, when you go back to the U.S. as your ambassadors and you give your 5 required speeches, that you try to inspire and encourage people to come here, but that you avoid making them feel guilty, and even more importantly, that we all try, because I have to include myself in this, we avoid judging people for being afraid. We try to explain to them why they should come anyway, but I've seen in my own life and in conversations with others about preparing for the war with Iraq that we need to respect also that people are afraid. I want to share with you my kind of new reading of an old song. You all probably know the song Kol Olam Kulo Gesher Tsar Ma'od. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, but the most important thing, we usually translate it as not to be afraid at all. Lo lefached klal. And I see the whole world differently now, this global Judaism, but I see how very narrow that bridge is that connects us, because if I wasn't here, I wouldn't be connected. And I don't think it's true that the most important thing is not to be afraid at all, because there is reason to be afraid. But the word klal also means as a rule. And so I think if you want that bridge to be connected, then you can't be afraid as a general rule. You still have to come to Israel. I want to leave you with one last image. I'm standing right now where two Kohanim stand at morning services to recite the priestly blessing every morning. This is something that we do in Jerusalem every day that I'd never seen, where Kohanim stand live and give you the blessing, and you can actually respond Amen. And I learned in my Halacha L'Maaseh that they do that here in Israel because you have to have a Lev Simcha, a heart full of joy. And those who receive the blessing have to stand face to face with those who are giving the blessing. And they have to bow their head with humility. And so I want to say in closing that I think the difference between being an American with privilege who's spoiled, an American with privilege who realizes that we're blessed, is coming face to face to encounter that blessing with humility, with that bowed head. And I don't want to forget myself, and I hope none of you will forget that here in Jerusalem, even with the fear, we receive blessings every day, not only by the hands and the words of the Kohanim who stand here, but in our classrooms with our fellow classmates and out on the streets in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Is everybody in who wants to be in? Yes. It's not enough. We only got 50 people.
They burn the wood for underneath, and then the stone is sitting in the right location.
This is all just theoretical, though. They don't really know?
No, we know. That we know, because they done the searching, and that was the only way to do it. But to move a stone for 550 pounds, did you... the Western Wall. Now, the big question is why they need actually to make those walls if the temple was still on the top. You remember how the first temple built? Built on the peak of Mount Moriah. If this is the mountain, and you want to make more space on the top, what are you doing? Today you hire a few Mr. Caterpillar or Mr. John Deere, and you chop the top of the mountain. But you shouldn't touch the peak of the mountain. This is the Holy of the Holy. What is the alternative? No, you're building a retaining wall. I'm not advertising, don't get me wrong, for cigarettes. But what actually they done, if this is the peak of the mountain, King Herod built 4 retaining walls. And he fill it with earth. And he make more space. So when people actually asking, and the big question that we're asking ourselves, how come we're gathering in the front of the Western Wall? Because the Western Wall is nothing to do with the building of the temple. But this is the closest place that we can be to the area where the temple used to be. But those are 4 retaining walls. But there's something holy in the western wall, and not only in the western wall, in the southern wall too. A life example, you can see where we're standing right now. Right here is part of the complex that's built by the Umayyad family, the Muslims family that came from Egypt, settled down in Jerusalem, renovate, and they build a beautiful palace here. But at around 702, 705, when they complete this palace, at the year 747, earthquake, the palace destroyed completely. Nothing happened to the southern wall and the western wall. But the palace that they built went down completely. Isn't it a miracle?
And they had cheap information.
But they use, look what they use.
Yeah.
It's what we call a second use of a building material.
Recycled.
You see, no, it's a stone that pulled down by the Roman during the Second Temple period. They pushed those stones down to the valley. And the Muslims, the Umayyad family, collect those stones and they start to build their palace with that. Look at the size of the stone. And look at the frame around each one of them. Here you can see we just mentioned, and we talk about the frame. Why they done this frame? You see, it's 2 pieces of stone. But as soon as you make the frame and you put 2 stones together, they almost match. Here is, this stone is a little damaged. But the frame actually visually, when you're looking at that, is like a 1 stone with a beautiful frame decoration. And that's how they done it. But those stones used to be here on the top, because here you can see clearly when you're looking at the top and you're coming down until you're reaching the large stone with a frame. The upper level is the one that's built during the Muslims period, mostly going back to the time of Suleiman the Magnificent. As you're going down, this is the part that we are missing, the damage by the Roman. Let's move further.
Technology during the Roman period actually is better.
You remember what we saw on the corner where actually the Levi used to blow the horn, the shofar? Used to be on the top. Those are the stone. Remember that we saw show me.
Those windows
Now, I don't know many of you follow it. The architecture going back, you know, we call it the Roman time, but we do know that the one that's done most of the work here was King Herod the Great. But he got all the Roman influence, how and to design and from architect that he brought with them from Rome. But the genius thing that they done here, to build this, I call it a monster, because it's a huge construction. They never use a cement between each one of the stone. Never use cement. So how you design a thing, how you can build a straight wall without a cement holding the stone, and when you fill it up on the top, how you manage to design that the wall won't collapse and fall down. I don't know many of you look carefully at the wall, the western wall even. How they designed it. The stone down below, as they put a second one, she was like 1 inch inland, and the third one 1 inch inland, and is like closing up like a pyramid. When you fill it up on the top, the wall can move and be standing still, but it won't fall. And if you look here, look carefully. Look at the stone down below. You see it's a 1 inch. Look at the second one, 1 inch. Third one. See as you're going up. That's how I managed to design it and to do it without putting any cement. Some of the stone here is like close to 15, 20, 30 tons. We find actually one stone further down that weighed 550 tons. One single stone.
How do they move it?
How they move it, they have a few systems. One of them from the stone quarry, by the way, I don't know if, and if you have a chance, on the north side of the city wall of today is a stone quarry that we discovered underneath of that mountain, but from the other side, that believed to be as one of those major stone quarry to build the retaining wall around the temple. Now, from the stone quarry, as they cut the stone, and they use it actually with a small, very primitive tool to separate the rock. If it was a small one, they build a wheel in both sides of the stone, and they roll it from one place to the other. If it was a bigger stone, 2 lines of wheel carried by a bull from one place to the other. So to reach this place is one thing, but how are you going to put the stone in the right location? So you roll it on a ramp, either with fat of animals or on pieces of wood until you reach the right location. To put it sitting on the right location, you burn the wood underneath until the stone's sitting down. But you have to be very professional, because stone that weight 100 tons come down, no way to move it again. So you have to do it in the right way. This is the area that we call it Robinson Arch, and you can see the beginning of the arch. You see coming out from the wall?
Yeah.
And the market, the bazaar that we mentioned, the mikveh that used to be more to the left over there that we saw on the model. And this is the place. What time is it?
1:30.
You want to run it?
I'm Ben Adler, in the Rabbinical School at JTS. I'm from San Antonio, Texas originally, but I've lived in New York for the past 10 years, and that's where I live right now. And I came to Israel with the JTS Solidarity Mission because I wanted to show my support for Israel, and I also wanted to come back to a place that I've been before but haven't been to in a while. And I guess my message that I would want to give to people in America, Jewish people, is that the drama of Jewish history is being played out here in a very important way, and I think it's vital for us to be part of it and to be witnesses and to also give our support to Israel. And I definitely feel safe here, as safe as I do in any place in America, certainly in New York. And if you can, you should come for yourself and for the Jewish people and for the Israeli people.
you saying something?
It's also in the middle. It's
Right.
also in the middle.
So
of the
that's one
country.
trend. To relate to that, Jerusalem is more or less in the middle, but to continue, it's in the middle. But also, and it's an amazing factor that David HaMelech, when he decided to become king and to become king of the whole entire nation, he tells them Psukim v'Yerushalayim malach 33 shana al kol Yisrael v'Yehuda. And he wanted to be really a king of the whole entire nation. And being a king of the whole nation, he chose a neutral place. He didn't want, before when he was a king in Hebron, but now when he's a king in everyone, he wants to choose a place which maybe it's not the best physical reasons, but it really is accessible, and no shevet, no tribe will feel that it's his. So it's amazing, and it's amazing walking around in Israel, walking around here, well, knowing that David HaMelech 3,000 years ago decided for Jerusalem to be his capital, and it's really his capital nowadays. David HaMelech wanted it to be his capital, and it was his capital. And he also, we know that he brought up Aron Hashem. He wanted also to build a temple, the Beit HaMikdash. He wasn't, he was told through the Navi from God that he's not supposed to do it, and his son is supposed to do it. He wanted to make it the central reason for everything. He didn't succeed. He started something which continued in the next generation, and really Shlomo built his temple. So what we're relating to and we'll be seeing in the rest of the tour is trying to understand a little of the period of the first temple in Ir David, in Yerushalayim. It starts from David HaMelech, from Shlomo, and the last king we know is Tzidkiyahu, relating to the Navi Yirmiyahu. And we'll be walking around and trying to hear little stories and seeing little things. Amazing walking here on top and under and like all over, trying to understand from different angles this place and the Tanakh, which I was looking in Psukim and trying to count pages, how many pages of books were in this place. And just going back, if we start from Shmuel Bet, which is David HaMelech, through Melachim, through Yirmiyahu, through Yeshayahu, and we know like books that Shlomo wrote and Psalms. It's amazing to know that really all this is written here. So just me, every time I'm here, it's like a place of magic. So I hope we'll see it together. Now just understand what we see here. So first of all, just we look around and we open up Psalms, and it tells us in Tehillim Perek Kuf Kafei, Yerushalayim marim saviv la, ve'Adonai saviv la'amo, me'ata v'ad olam. Standing here, David HaMelech, we just said his castle or his citadel is right here, and maybe, this is what he said. I always, when I come to Jerusalem, walk around and I see, we come in the entrance in the number 1 road going up, you see tons of hills, but this is the Yerushalayim that David HaMelech is talking about, and saying, Yerushalayim marim saviv la, ve'Hashem saviv la'amo. You really see nothing, now let's relate to what it is now. In the days of David HaMelech, nothing around. All he saw was this hill down, this Jebusite town which he made Israeli or Judean, and I don't know say the names, but nothing around it. And what was around it and what developed, let's just try and understand what we see around now and to connect it to what we see then. So first of all, if we continue a little, like 200 years after David HaMelech, in the first temple in the days of Chizkiyahu, you see these small entrances, the small cave mouth. So those are mouths of that they used to bury like all the rich and famous people in the period of like the 8th century BCE. They found there a family cave and 50 different family caves. And interesting anecdotes. First of all, we see this village Silwan, which was built after it was built only a few hundred years ago. The beginning, the people lived in the caves. Time went by and they built their homes there. So it's interesting that their basements are those caves. It's just interesting to see how the time is always like they have the past and present together. But what we really see is they found an interesting inscription which said, Zot, I'll read it to you exactly, and that's just 1 second. It tells us, just a minute. Don't want to be mistaken to the inscription. Yeah. Wait. זאת קבורת יהו אשר על הבית, אין פה כסף וזהב, כי אם עצמותיו ועצמות אמתו איתו, ארור האדם אשר יפתח את זאת. Should I translate? Okay. The tomb, this is the tomb of Yahweh, we're missing a word, who is over the house. There's no gold and silver here, only his and his wife's bones. Cursed is the man who opened this cave. So this cave was found with no gold and silver, which is obvious. But what is interesting? Radio in this car. Right, it's obvious that there is. Nowadays in Israel, you see tons of cars riding TV on them. It's obvious that they're not going in the territories. You don't want to take any chances. But what's interesting is trying to connect who is Yahuwah that's on the home. And we, in the different psukim, there is different people that are called Asher al Habayit. There is I guess he was a person who was in charge. There's a person called Shevna Asher al Habayit. There's a person called Chilkiyahu Asher al Habayit, which we hear in the books of Yirmiyahu. And it's interesting to try and connect who is this person. They're not sure because we're missing who's the Yahu. We don't have the name. We have everything except the name who it is. But we have the description of who it is. And that's a small example of really trying to connect to the findings in the area and to what is written in the Tanakh.
Hey, my name is Ryan Dulkin, and I'm a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary of New York City. This is my second time to Jerusalem in the last 12 months. Last year I was a student at Machon Shechter, which is our conservative rabbinical school affiliate in Jerusalem, where I lived here for 8 months. I'm coming back to Jerusalem despite being here in a difficult time because I've had the experience of being here for a year, and I know that life goes on and that people are living, riding the buses, they're doing what they need to do, and I just love being here. For me, Jerusalem is like a third home, and it's a real privilege to be back. I'm sorry? Yeah. I come from New York City, and I have to say that when I'm walking around the streets of Jerusalem, especially at night, I feel safer here than I do in New York City. I hope that you'll join me as just one of many Americans who will make the journey this year to Jerusalem to experience what it's like to be in the Jewish state, what it's like to be with the Jewish people, and to really give the kind of support to both the state of Israel and the people of Israel at this difficult time.
Are they yours? No. That's the Moradeh. The guys? Most of the group.
Yeah, there's one person.
Okay, so let's just do it quickly because we really have short time. And we'll be seeing, I didn't say exactly what time. And what do we see? So first of all, this is one of the tells of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is a tell. We know all over the country is a tell, but here we really see different layers of settlements in the same place. And what do we see? First of all, do you see this like a step structure? Yes. So that was a base. I mean, according to archaeologists, it was a base for the Citadel, which was called Metzudat Zion before David HaMelech's time. You could pass around and see. This is what the archaeologists think it is. This is like the base of the Citadel, and then like the castle, the Citadel was built over it. In the northern part, we saw that there's a hill in the northern part, so you need a lot of protection in the northern part of town. So here's where the Citadel and the castle was. That's also more up north, and there was something else which was built here. So we go like 200 years ahead in time, and we see that there was a whole neighborhood of the high society people living right here. And how do we know? It's amazing to see in the same place. You see that this is a step structure, and something built into it. It was like cut into it, and we see here this platform, and we see here different findings. Whoever sees their steps, does anybody see their to the left steps, like gray steps going up? Yeah. So this is really a neighborhood, a high society neighborhood. And how do we know that it's high society? There's a few amazing findings. First of all, in the center we see this platform, and there's 4 different pillars, which shows us a shape of a Israelite house in that period. And why is it unique? We see those stairs, and an Israelite house used to really be simple, one story. The minute we see these stairs, we understand that there were 2 stories. It's already showing us that this house was a little more wealthy. A duplex, exactly. So this is a very exaggerated drawing, but to give an understanding of what we see. So this is the center. There's it was like some sort of a courtyard or some sort of porch in the center, and then you had like the rooms were around it, and then the second floor. We find even more meaningful findings. This is like it's just interesting to see, but the archaeologists see, whoever sees it, you could see it later, there's a round stone with a hole in it, right there to the right. Whoever sees it will show it to you later. They found organic material underneath, and they understand that was one of the oldest toilets in the olden period, and it's also unique. Most of the houses did not have that. But let me just connect to meaningful finding. That's really like meaningful, which really connect to the city of David, or the city relating to the Tanakh, is that in 1978, the first big, who asked me about the diggings, the first big diggings was really 1978 excavations, and Yigal Shiloh, he came with a crew of archaeologists and just volunteers that came to dig, and they did here 7 digging seasons from 78 to 85. During his diggings, he always told his volunteers, his archaeologists, listen, you've got to be very, whoever's ever dug, you know that you have to look for details and little findings, and even sometimes have to sift like tons of buckets of sand, like hard work. And he told them, you've got to sift because there's going to be good findings here. After 3 years of digging here, they found different findings, but what I found took them 3 years to discover. And what was it? You could pass this around, and it's this. It's a clay seal. You can just pass it around to see what it is. They found 51. 49 of them are now in the Israel Museum, so the next time you come, you're invited to see them. But 51 original clay seals with old in Hebrew inscription that they take it back to the 8th period BCE. Now, what is it written there? First of all, what's amazing about the Hebrew inscription is that it's different lettering, but same exactly understanding. In a minute, we could just work with word for word with some sort of legend. We could understand what's written there. And they found different names. Now, one of the names they found, I'll explain in a minute how this clay seal works before I say the name, but what is this clay seal? When they wrote different letters or different agreements, different sides had to sign. So they closed it with string, they put a piece of clay, and then we know Achashverosh, which has its Tabat HaMelech, so really all the high society, all the important people had their own rings with their name on it. They used to imprint it, and then their name was written on it. But we know of clay, that clay falls apart. And what's amazing here is that we found whole ones, but we did not find the letters. We did not find the leather. What happened? In 586, we know of the horrible destruction of the temple, and the whole city was burnt also. So this area, I guess they had some sort of archive, a room full of different agreements, and it was all burnt. But we know, whoever works in ceramics know that when you make some sort of piece of powder and you put it in a high temperature oven, it hardens, and we know, walking around archaeological tales, we found lots and lots of ceramic findings, because that's really what's kept. So we found those ceramics, which were the seals, which were burnt in the heat of and the fire of the temple fire and of the destruction. This is 586, and that makes us understand what happened there before. But that's an interesting fact, because they also found a layer of ashes in one of the rooms right underneath here, which I guess was the archive. And amazing that finding here in 1978, they found ashes that go back to the first temple. Now, one of the names, which makes this even more of an amazing finding, was Gemariyahu ben Shafan. Now, in Hebrew, Shafan is rabbit, so people always laugh with the name because it's really not modern. But it tells us in Yirmiyahu, Perek Lamedvav, Pasuk Yud, Vayikra Baruch B'Sefer, Et Divrei Yirmiyahu Bet Adonai, B'Lishkat Gemariyahu ben Shafan HaSofer B'Chatzar Elon. Baruch read in the book the words of Yirmiyahu in the office, or in the area of Gemariyahu ben Shafan, who was the writer in the courtyard. He was one of the writers. And a writer, of course, is a person who knew how to write. Not everyone knew how to write. So we see here one of the findings, just understand this simple story that happened here. Gemariyahu ben Shafan, I guess he was a writer, or I guess one of the people that used to sign on the contracts. I don't know exactly to tell you what he was, but we find... He was a scribe. Yeah.
Achikam ben Shafan.
Achikam ben Gemariyahu ben Shafan.
Achikam, I think, was his father.
But
anyway.
Anyways, he was a writer, and we know that we find a finding that we know that the small proof. Interesting to see his name in one of the clay seals. That clay seal's in the Israel Museum if you want to see it. So this is really archived. Not in every neighborhood you have it. We're finding the huge house in the toilet. Really understand this? That in the period of the 7th, 8th century BCE, there was a really high society neighborhood living right here. Of course, it's also very convenient because it's the closest neighborhood to the temple and to all the Armon HaMelech and to the castle and to everything. years passed, and we just see we see these number 2, number 3, 2 towers. When we know of Nehemiah, when he came and he tried to rebuild Jerusalem in the 5th century BCE, he built a wall around the town, and this was the eastern wall of the town. These two towers are part of the eastern wall. We have a description in Nehemiah exactly that he built the walls, and it describes different places. So just as we see a small example of a tale, 3 different things in the same entire place, which tell us of periods in more than 1,500 years period of time. This is called, it's important to say, I didn't say, it's called Shetach G, Area G. This is when he dug here, this is the area he called it. I mean, he split up the whole entire mountain of Ir David, and this he called hill of Ir David, and this he called Shetach G. So we're running down, and we're going to a very important place that the town cannot live without it, and we're down the hill towards the water. Okay, unless there's whoever wants to see, this is the toilet, this is the round gray stone with the hole in the center. Oh yeah. That's considered the toilet in 2,800 years ago. And that's, I mean, the finding we see, which is just and then more stairs to give us the understanding really of a large and 2 Arab families in this area. Inside, you go in this door, there's like a courtyard, and then inside there's 2 different families. Just an example, first of all, of the Jewish families that live here. There's 30 Jewish families and 80 Arab families in this area of Ir David. And also to understand that they do live in peace. I mean, there is security because people don't want to take chances and they want to protect themselves. But it's just interesting to see. I mean, I just didn't want to ignore what there is here around here. Since 1867, I'll just relate exactly why, but this was open to visitors since at least from 70, I mean, easily since Shiloh started activity, but it was really open here during the years. It was known of for 135 years. But we'll see in the past 7 years they've discovered new amazing findings which really changed different theories which were clear and understood for 130 years. But before we just start, just quickly a little understanding of the town in before David's time, the Yebusi town. This is the hill, and we have the water source, which is called the Gihon Spring, which is, so I mean, we know water sources usually are in the lower part of the hill. And of course there's a debate where we put walls. I mean, we have the security, the people that are for security, and they say to put the city walls right up here. And opposite, we have the people that are pushing for having the largest city possible and worrying for having as most possible housing and putting the city walls here. Of course, we try to find the pretty middle, and we found walls from 3,800 years ago that go around here, okay, around like half height. Now, everything's good. I mean, that's protection with the siege, and everything is excellent. You have a wall, just you could even pass on. But there's a drawing to understand of just a minute, just so you could see. This is the wall, more or less understand what the city looked like. Everything is good, but the problem is when there's days of siege. I mean, when there's no siege, people go out of the gates, go to the water, fill up water, and go back in. But what happens in the days of siege? I mean, what do people do? And I mean, the answer may be really simple. Of course, we're going underground, and you go through a tunnel. So you get to a tunnel, and really, now, this is what we're going to see, is to try and see how do the people, the Jebusites people that live here, try and have a solution to get to the water in the days of the siege. And what did they do, and how did they do it? So Charles Warren, he was British, and in 1867 he was sent to Israel. After he didn't succeed in investigating and understanding and finding the whole story of Jack the Ripper, he was sent as a representative of the British Army here to Israel, and he started mapping out, excavating, trying to understand. He loved the Temple Mount, Har HaMoriah, and Bet HaMikdash, and he started digging, and you saw the shaft when you were just there, of Charles Warren. When he didn't have enough wood to have for his tunnels, support for his tunnels, he went to other places. He did not need so much wood, and he went down here. There, so we're just waiting one more second, but we'll be getting there to the shaft. And just notice that this is like 2.5, more or less 2 meters, 2.5 meters width and length, more or less even. And you just come down and you'll see that it stretches very much its height, and it looks a little different when we get there. Wow. ציון זין צייתל עיר דוד, ואומר דוד ביום ההוא, כל מכה יבוסי ויגע בצינור. ואת הפסחים ואת העברים שנואי נפש דוד, על כן יאמרו עיוור ופיסח לא יבוא אל הבית. So I'll just translate the pasuk. David said, they're coming to Yerushalayim, try and capture it. What did he say to the soldiers? He tells us, whoever wants to kill, of course translation has a perush in it, so I'll try to be, it's not really outside. We'll continue out of the water system, but I want to stop here before because there are lots of groups there, and I'll just sum up and finish what we've seen to understand. Someone asked the question, how did they get the water system? So a little describe more about what happened in the archaeological excavations. In '95, the visitor centers of Ir David decided they want to build a new visitor center in the place, which is the place of importance in Ir David, right near the spring. So they bought an area, and we'll be right out there. So it's nowadays they built a roof over it because they're doing a lot of excavations. They bought an area, and they're planning to build the new visitor centers right there. What happened in Israel? There's a law that every area you build, you've got to do an excavation, and the excavations could take a week and could take centuries. The archaeologists were sure that through 2-3 weeks they'll be done, and it's already 2003 and they're still digging. We may even have the privilege to see them digging there. But what they discovered changed their whole understanding of this whole water system, and give them a perspective, and discovered brand new things that, I mean, very, very old, but new things for the archaeology to understand what was in Yerushalayim in the year 3,800 years ago, before David HaMelech came. So what was it? And we're just going out. We could imagine the little kids, the little Jebusite kids or Canaanite kids walking down those steps, walking on the height of the rock that I showed you, not going down. That was, I guess, 1,000 years later deepening, I'll relate to that. Walking the whole entire way and coming to a huge pool, which had a small tunnel that was connected to the water spring. So that we'll see the water spring, a tunnel, connected to the pool. There's a large place that this tunnel led to, not a small shaft. And it was protected by we found already two huge citadels, two huge towers, I don't know, that protected it. So that's already, understand this big tunnel which led to some sort of large exit, large pool. Now where are we now? And this area was closed, and when they were digging and they're finding that, they saw these natural caves. These were natural caves that they find findings from people at Siam. Just look around at these caves, and I'll relate to what it is on the way out, because there's two groups waiting. So just continue. boats, which they weren't here by mistake, and they were also brought here to build another citadel, another protection around the water spring. We'll be going down and see the water spring, and this may be the citadel. He shows how they story, which I'm reading it specifically in this place, tells he was told suddenly that his son Adoniyahu ben Chagit decides that he's going to be a king. But Sheva, which remembered that David HaMelech told her that Shlomo is going to be, her son is going to be the king, was horrified, and she came to him and told him, "Hello, Shamata ki malach Adoniyahu ben Chagit. You hear that Adoniyahu ben Chagit was crowned and stuff?" So, David HaMelech says, what happened? I was talking about the Ashurim, the Assyrians that came, and the whole Israel was it was burnt up, and lots of Jews from different communities were it wasn't called Jews, but people from the different tribes, the 10 tribes, were like wandering all over the country or exiled all over the world. And a lot of people also came to the area of Yerushalayim. They lived, I mean, if we're talking about hills, so this is the original Ir David. When Shlomo built Bet HaMikdash, this is how it was. And the time afterwards, I mean, when the people came, with all the Israel people, different tribes were here, they all lived on the western hill, it's called. Chizkiyahu, which was the king of Yerushalayim in the year 700 BCE, understood that the Assyrians may still come to him. And we know the stories, I mean, from Melachim and from Divrayim that describe what did Chizkiyahu do. So what did he do? He collected little like grains and food in order to have, we found, there's fine things of different jugs, parts of jugs, and the Tzedek LaMelech, which we know that was considered in that period, and that's maybe what Chizkiyahu used to collect, I mean, in different towns, also, besides Yerushalayim, in different towns in Judea, in case there's going to be a siege. Besides that, he had peace with Egypt and with other countries, to be sure. Another thing he did was build a wall, a new wall, because I just said a minute ago that the city was really widened. He built a new wall that around the city, which really shows the development of it. And another important thing, which I can't ignore after being down in the water, he found a new solution, how to protect the water in the days of siege. The one that David HaMelech went through wasn't relevant anymore. A, David HaMelech succeeded to go through it, so I guess it wasn't good anymore. B, the city developed, and the water system we were talking about is right over here. And the city, the people living here, and you want to have the water accessible. So what did he do? And this is something we know of. It's called the Chizkiyahu Tunnel. And he built, his people, 3 years, from 701 till 704 to 701, they worked on this tunnel. So they started from two edges, and this is the tunnel, like S-shaped, 533.1 meters, a little more than half a kilometer long, and even it's an slope, the whole entire way. I mean, water, its gravitation has to be high in the beginning and lower. It's a difference of half a meter from the beginning till the end. So half a kilometer and going down half a meter. It's amazing creation. It's considered unique for that period, and it's an amazing tunnel and water system they worked on. And what he did is he brought this water inside, of course, inside the walls. Beforehand it was outside of the walls, inside the walls, and accessible to both parts of the city. It's considered an amazing finding, and where those people went into Tovel, if they continued walking there, and you're invited always next time you're here walking for half an hour in water till over the knees, walking in the tunnel of Chizkiyahu. It was also discovered in the second part of the 19th century, and an amazing thing which was discovered there, and gives us more of an understanding, is the inscription of Chizkiyahu. Now, it was, if we have it in the end of our Tznachim, I mean, whoever, one of the, wait a second, I'll just show it, so you'll just see what it is. One of the largest inscriptions in Olden Hebrew, Ktav Ivri Atik, was found right over here. And the little kids which were just in the pool, they, this is the inscription. We have a bigger, this is it. Now it's broken because there were people that tried stealing it and tried taking it off. They broke it. They were caught beforehand, but that's why you have it broken. And now it's in Istanbul, like lots of things that were found in Israel and the Turkish, while the Turkish Empire was here. And if we continue to the British period, there's lots of things that were found in Israel in the British Museum. But what's amazing, 6 rows which describe us how the people came from 2 edges in the excitement of the minute of the meeting each other, and they came and they met and they met each other in the end. Different questions: how did they succeed walking for half a kilometer, 200 meters for 3 years? I mean, they used to come every day and work on it, but they found each other. And there's people that say, and different. I mean, they heard each other. That's what it says there. But just one thing is that why was it in an S shape? Just 1 second. There's people that say the reason that it was S shape was they're coming from 2 sides. If it's S shape, there's more of a chance for them to meet. If everyone would come in a straight in one angle, I mean, there's less chances. Because if they didn't meet here, they would continue and meet here. That's there's people that say that there's going through an archaeological crack, and that's what they were going through. There's different, we know in I mean, it's not, there's different really explanations for what it was, but what we really see, and this is what we could see in our eyes, and you're invited, is to really see an amazing creation which protected the water in the days of Chizkiyahu. Just to see what happened in the end of the siege, we know, and this is amazing, that it's told to us. First of all, it tells us in Melachim and in Yeshayahu and in Chizkiyahu, it describes what Chizkiyahu did. It tells us in Chizkiyahu, Mikveh asitem ben hachomotayim. A mikveh, a water source, a water mikveh, makom that you gather water, you did it between the 2 chomot, in the chomot. Or I'll just show you just one pasuk that explains this what happened. So, אמור להיות פה. This one pasuk which tells us the end of the story is we know of Malach Hashem that came to Vayi b'layla hu. The Assyrians are right here sieging on Yerushalayim. There's a lot of mefarshim that say that maybe because the people of Judea, they succeeded and nothing happened to them in the siege of Ashurim, that may have been helping them in feeling kochi ve'otzem yadi, or feeling their importance. And there's continuous description and describing in the Sifrei Nevi'im and all of the Avodah Zarah and of the Chataim that the people in Israel, in Yehuda, continued doing. And you know of different prophets that came to Am Yisrael and told them, wake up, tachzeru b'tshuva. And the person that specifically you want to relate to is Yirmiyahu. He started in a little before, like a year 630 BCE, and he was 18 when God came to him and told him, listen, it's your job is now to go and be a prophet and convince and try and work on Am Yisrael to come to Lachzor b'tshuva. He did not want to do it. He describes how people related to him so negatively, and he says, Oili Miki Adetani, Can you imagine, I look at Yirmiyahu walking around Ir David trying to wake up people and everyone ignores. And even more than that, I mean, there's a situation, Mamash, a few years towards the end of his life, he's already 60 years old, and he walks around Ir David and he tells them, listen a minute, it's already the time when the Babylonians are they're having a siege around Jerusalem, and he comes to them and he tells them, listen, we should give up to Babel. You'll be 70 years there in exile, and then you'll come back. They threw me into a pit and they threw stones on me. The water came on top of my head, and then I felt nigzarti. That's it. Koli shamata. Karati shimcha Hashem libor tachtiot. Koli shamata azar. He prayed to God, and then he was helped. He was really brought up. It's a whole story, and that's just giving you on the tip of a spoon of what there's more to hear and to see here. But his prophecies continued, and they came true. And we know in the year 586 of
Hi, I'm Meryl Kramer, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm in Israel the next week with the Jewish Theological Seminary, and we went on a 4-day mission, and it's been an incredible experience. And I'm staying another week with friends. My sister's here for the year, and my parents were nervous for me to come, but my sister's here for a year, so they really couldn't tell me I couldn't be here. And they've also both traveled here within the last year during the Intifada, so although they're nervous, they know that Israel's important, and because of them I also feel that Israel's very important, and that's why I'm here. And every time I come I feel a stronger connection to the country, and I really don't think that anything is going to stop me from being here. I've been nervous at times, but I've never really felt completely unsafe. The news in America makes things seem a lot worse. My sister, who's here for the year, was home for 2 weeks, and she cried on her way back because she was with American news for 2 weeks, and her views were all distorted just because of American news. And then when she got here, she was like smiling the first 10 minutes she was here, and it was as if she was never nervous. So yeah, I hope I can come back as much as my parents will let me, and financially allowing. But no, I don't think the Matzah will ever stop me from coming, or any of my family. So I'm Yisrael Chai. I'll be back whenever I can.
Hi, my name is Leah Yamtovian. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm here on the JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary mission to Israel. This is my first time here since I was in 8th grade, which was 5 years ago. And I must say that a lot has changed since then. I went to Ben Yehuda Street, and it was much less crowded than I remember it being. I went to a mall, and they were checking my bags, had metal detectors. So I feel very safe. It's just I'm saddened by the fact that we need all these security measures. With JTS, we've done a lot of stuff, like going to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, going to Independence Hall, going to visit Ir David and Jerusalem, and I feel completely safe. It's just a lot less crowded than it was when I was here before. I also have a lot of family here that I'm going to be visiting. One of my cousins is going into the Army next month, so I feel like I'm here to support him, here to support the economy, here to support Israel, and let everybody know that everybody in America, we do what we can. If we can't be here all the time, we still try to support you guys. So I'll be back as soon as I can.